Welcome to In the Zoom Where It Happens with our hosts, Shannon Spees and Brandon Krekel.
Hi, I'm Shannon Spees.
And I'm Brandon Krekel, and we really are excited to have Susan Tomlinson Schmidt, CEO of the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance, joining us today. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
And I will jump right in with our first question. And so if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started with Nonprofit Leadership Alliance.
Well, sure. I was a graduate of our program many years ago and went out in the world and started working and eventually found my way back to the University of Memphis, where I taught in our program. Our organization works with college students to find careers in the nonprofit sector. So I taught in the organization in Memphis for 12 years. And through that work, when we had a leadership transition in Kansas City, my board recruited me to come here. So that was 8 years ago. And I've really made Kansas City my home. It's been a great place, not just for me, but my whole family has thrived here. So great transition. And that's how I ended up in the Midwest.
Love that. And I'm glad you made Kansas City your home. I've been here my whole life and I think it's lovely. I do.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Memphis, but maybe I should check it out.
Well, Brandon, they have good barbecue too.
That's what I've heard. Is that where Elvis is from? He's from somewhere.
Yes, and they have good rock and roll.
Yeah. All right. Love it. I'll visit Graceland and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. But well, it sounds like you've been in the nonprofit world for a while. What led you to want to become, a nonprofit leader, if you will? What was, what attracted you about that?
Yeah. Well, like so many people in the nonprofit sector, I really wandered into this work, and it was from volunteering. I had graduated from college. I married someone who got transferred to New York. So I was really fish out of water coming from the South. And so I started volunteering just to get out of our apartment. We had a very small apartment, and he was working all the time. David, my husband, he's a chef. And so my mom suggested to me, you just need to get out. And so I started volunteering. And pretty soon I had 3 different volunteer jobs. But New York, it's very expensive. And so finally my husband said, I feel like these volunteer gigs are costing you a lot of money and you've got to figure out what you're going to do. So I was so passionate about it. And a friend just told me, there's whole jobs. You don't have to just be a volunteer to have a helping career. So that's when I went back to graduate school and got my degree in nonprofit management and found our certified nonprofit professional program, CNP, which is our credential. So as I said earlier, I earned the credential and then I went out in the world and worked. But in so many ways, I feel like I grew up with this organization. And what I know from serving in so many different roles is not enough of us are aware of nonprofit careers and choose them. We wander into them, much like my story. And so my organization is trying to change that. We want to be a career of choice. We want to help people understand career pathways and certainly dispel a lot of the myths about working for a nonprofit organization. You can buy a house, you can pay back your student loans, all of those things are possible. So that's really what we work to do, is just career pathing and building talent for the nonprofit sector.
And you mentioned the certified nonprofit professional
Right.
certification, if you will. So what does it mean to you, or how important is it to take that extra step and get that CNP?
Oh gosh, that is a great question, Shannon, because the difference is so significant. So many universities across the country, not enough, I will say we're a very small niche, have nonprofit studies programs. But what our credential does is give real world experience to mirror that. So we are all about getting students out into internships and service projects and site visits and, applying what you've learned, attending conferences. And what happens at the end of that is 2 things that are really critical. First of all, you make a better first job choice. So if you can't handle working with children or homeless. You know your emotional stamina for working with certain populations. You also know if you hate fundraising, but love event planning. So it really, both functionally and with mission, where your passion lies, helps our students make good first job choices. And what's so critical about that is then they stay longer in the sector. And that's really, turnover in our sector is one of our most critical employment problems. So that's why I say it's so significant to make the first job choice that keeps you invested and moving forward. And the second thing that it does is it gives you about 2 years on the job experience. So what our employment partners tell us is that those CMPs come on the job with so much shorter learning curve than their peers. And we actually have data to back that up. LinkedIn did a study for us and proved that our students, our CMPs, stay employed in a nonprofit organization 50% longer than their non-credentialed peers. And they're 7 times more likely to rise to a director or higher than their non-credentialed peers. So our secret sauce is application, truly. And I will tell you, it's self-selecting to high achievers who don't want to just learn in a classroom, which was hard this last year. It sounds odd talking that way right this second, but, typically college experiences are wide open and our students are getting out in the field, daily. So that really is the difference maker. We're a competency-based program. So we know our students have been instructed and assessed and applied all 10 of those competencies.
I want to ask you really quick about maybe more of a recruitment side of things. So
Sure.
I know you've had, an emphasis in, recruiting a diverse talent pool. Well, with the last, year and the social unrest going on, has that changed your views or your output or your outlook, I guess, on that moving forward?
Well, so that's the $1 million question for higher education right now, Brandon. What's enrollment going to look like next year?
And you've got the answer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad you called. No, of course, enrollment was devastated this year. And even where students were enrolled, they were very place-based. So our student programs, we are really looking forward to the fall, and it's sort of a resurgence. I just read, to your point, a article this week that said public health enrollment, so enrollment public health programs, has really spiked because of COVID. Now, those students are prime targets for something like a CMP credential. They get a major that is really, very technically focused on a certain role. And then what we can do is wrap around the knowledge of what a nonprofit is like, what it's like to work in a nonprofit. So it's a perfect combination, particularly for a non-clinical student who wants to do outreach and community engagement type activities. So we could very easily see a spike. I will tell you, we saw a big spike after 9/11, this real sense of patriotism and serving others. So I don't think that would be far off at all to see that. I do think we're going to see enrollment spike again. People are, students, college students of all ages, not just traditional age college students, are ready to get back to learning in a more traditional environment. We are very diverse. It's just people who are naturally called to this work are often on a pay it forward mission. So very frequently our students have been impacted in their own lives by some social service organization or person, a volunteer, or a staff member who has really changed their life by being meaningful in it. So that, since our client populations and nonprofits are very diverse, we find that our student population is too. We are roughly 36% persons of color, which absolutely could be better. But if you look at persons of color enrollment on college campuses, that's a pretty high number. So we feel good about what we are capturing. But even more importantly, we are 51% first generation college students. So, well, I won't call that more importantly, but equally as important is we're reaching a socioeconomic demographic that is really in touch with the people they're serving, right? So we feel good about the enrollment in our programs and how we can create a diverse pipeline to nonprofit organizations. Because like all organizations, that's a really critical metric that they're looking at right now. How much diversity do we have on staff?
And to kind of go along with that, I saw the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance was founded in 1948, so you've been
Right.
around quite a while, and headquartered in Kansas City, which not all of our audience may understand that or realize that. So a two-part question, I guess, just to piggyback on your last answer, in that how have you seen that change, and understanding you've only been there for 8 years, but just Nonprofit Leadership Alliance as a whole, how has that changed in the last or since opening in 1948? And then also, you work with so many so many universities or colleges around the United States, and being headquartered in Kansas City, that's pretty fantastic,
Yeah.
just from a personal standpoint. So how many universities do you work with, colleges do you work with?
Well, it's we work with quite a few. We work with universities in a couple of different ways. So we touch as many as 375 universities, but we have really strong relationships with more like 40. So some programs we aren't as tightly tied to. So I say that because I think your point is well made. The reach of our impact emanating from right here in Kansas City is huge. And we're so proud of that. So we were founded by Roe Bartle, who is a former Kansas City mayor. So there was never any question that our headquarters would be here, whether it was popular or not. And I think it's been great. It's been fabulous for me as a leader, for sure. I think it's totally helped. Our Kansas City has embraced this nonprofit culture. We're so philanthropic, and we are right in the middle of the country. So if you're going to run a national program, before COVID, I traveled every week. I loved living in Kansas City because I was so close to wherever I was going. The majority of large national nonprofits are headquartered in DC or New York. So we're an anomaly in some ways, but there's also some very hidden secrets here. Campfire is headquartered in Kansas City. So I do feel like I have plenty of peers that lead national organizations in Kansas City. So how have we changed in 72 years? In some ways, very dramatically. In other ways, not that much. And I don't say that to sound stale, but just to really give credence to the foresight of our founder. He was quite a visionary. In 1948, baby boomers were just rising in age to enter scouting and YMCA camping programs. And he saw that there was this great influx of clients coming into those programs. And so that those organizations would need to hire a lot of qualified people. And that was very hard to find. In 1948, not many people were standing around saying, gosh, wish I could work for a nonprofit, right? It wasn't popular. And so even in the Boy Scouts at that time, you had to have a 4-year degree to be an entry-level employee. So he put all of this together and came up with our program, which was give them the specialized training and experience. So this is the foresightful thing, this applied learning, competency-based. I mean, that is right on target lingo in higher education these days. And he was doing it 72 years ago. So it's remarkable in that regard. Now, what those 10 competencies are, how we do that, applied learning, all of that has certainly evolved. But the idea that he could construct this college to career pathway, how much about that do you read now? An industry-driven credential. I mean, he was just such an entrepreneur and so insightful. So there's a weight of following in those footsteps, but then there's also I just love it. I love that we are riding on that kind of visionaries' shoulders, because I think it's put us so much further ahead than if we had been one of many in New York or DC or West Coast. We're a treasure that came from one of Kansas City's most recognized founding fathers. So I love that. I love how you put all that together. And it just makes for a great story and a great home in Kansas City.
It's an awesome story. Yeah, I knew a little bit, but I forget Bartle was, the founder. And
yeah.
Really neat,
and that
actually.
whole baby boomers rising,
Yeah.
Who was thinking about that at the time?
Right.
And I will say, Shannon, in 1948, we had a female. We actually had 2 females in our first graduating class. And for that day and age, a college degree and working, that was very diverse. So we're proud of that.
That's absolutely impressive. Yes.
I think we got time for 2 more questions, maybe, Shannon. So you mentioned, graduating class. You guys have like a national or a large annual event each year, right?
We do, and it's often right here
in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to do that during COVID? If not, how did you guys do it?
Yeah. So January 20, we were in Kansas City and had about 650 students from all across the country here. And it was fabulous. And even the chamber, you hosted a couple of our student groups. It was, we had kids all over this city working in different nonprofits. And then, immediately after that, it shut down. So this year we're doing it in October. So we normally would have been in January again, but we are going to October this year in 2021. We did do a virtual conference in February to help some of our students who are ready to graduate and really needed that experience. We do a ton of stuff virtually. I certainly think it helps us reach a different market. A student who has different obligations, can't travel, whatever kind of disability or hardship. So I believe in doing both. And I think we'll continue to do that. We've done a virtual conference every year for 5 years while still doing the face-to-face. So it's a different segment. But I stand behind what we accomplished virtually too. I think it's a great experience as well.
So you were prepared, it sounds like, almost to do a virtual event. That's kind of nice. Yeah.
We just swapped our timing. So usually we would have had a fall virtual and a winter face-to-face. So that was a quick pivot.
Well, and you were truly ahead of the curve in many ways, and the virtual just being one of the latest ways that you've been ahead of the curve. So, well, we have time for one last question, and it's a question that we always like to ask of our guests, and that is, what is one thing that you would like our audience to know about Nonprofit Leadership Alliance?
Well, I would say what I want your audience to know is these are the movers and shakers and business people of Kansas City. And oftentimes nonprofits are not invited to the table when important decisions are made. Quite frankly, we're overlooked as an industry and an economic engine, and definitely we're overlooked as a workforce. And there are a lot of phenomenal leaders and a lot of great work and impact happening. And I know I've really enjoyed working with Andrew and getting involved with the Workforce Development Council. Our students played a role with the Welcoming Communities work that the Chamber is doing. So many places where nonprofit leaders can contribute. So my call is really just look around you. There's sometimes we're not invited to the table, and that's unfortunate because we want to develop our leaders at the same rate that corporations and governments want to develop their leaders. So what I would have you know is there's tons of good participants out there who are just waiting to be invited.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Susan, seriously, thank you so much for joining us today on in the Zoom. It was lovely talking with you. I hope we can, talk more. As we always say, it goes by too quickly, but on behalf of the Chamber, Shannon, myself, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.